We're crossing into reservation land now. You said I'm looking for some sort of factory?
Yeah.
We can look, but there's nothing out here.
Hi, it's Tom here, and you asked for it. Outlast 2, one of the scariest horror games of the past few years, is now available on Switch, a port from developer Red Barrels. Now, word on the net is Outlast 2 looks really good on the handheld, and that it's not too dissimilar to what you get on more powerful systems like PS4 or Xbox One. Perceptually speaking, it's hard to argue that point. I mean, I've done a lot of digging and put the two side by side, and the fact is that yes, the Switch version settings are cut back in some significant ways on paper, and I'll cover the specifics in a second. Some changes are more obvious than others, particularly the shift to a 30 FPS cap rather than 60 on PS4. In terms of the textures, shadows and more, there is a downgrade, but for this game in particular, it's hard to notice. So let's talk resolution first. Probably the most impressive aspect of the Switch port. Red Barrel states on its Twitter feed that the original Outlast, already out on Switch, runs at 1280 by 720 in portable mode and 1792 by 1008 while docked. Yes, that's right, 1008p. An unusual number, but it comes in at 93% on each axis of a full 1080p image. No doubt a crucial saving on GPU bandwidth. That's the original game though. I can confirm it's the exact same deal for the sequel though, and whether you play docked or portable, Outlast 2 runs at 30 frames per second as well. It's a bit of a success on that front at least. Bearing in mind the PS4 version runs at a native 1080p, the Switch version really isn't too far off, bearing in mind the power differential. Now before I get into the other specific differences, it's worth qualifying why they're not all that bad in reality. Outlast 2 runs on Unreal Engine 3, a somewhat older technology by this point, but Red Barrels has made it sing by adding its own twist to it. Based on the LinkedIn profile of the studio's senior programmer, Matthew Gauthier, extras are added like a physically based rendering system, parallax occlusion maps, volumetric fog, hair rendering and much more. He also mentions getting this Switch version up and running, and I quote, within a matter of weeks during the porting process. Not everything makes the cut though from PS4. Check out this shot of the helicopter seat stitching as one example. We're getting a lower resolution asset here than what PS4 is pushing. And the same goes for just about every surface I've been able to take a look at, including character skin shaders. A close-up of this model really shows Switch is missing key layers on the skin, and by comparison PS4 skin shader looks more alive and realistic. It does look somewhat raw on Switch, but since it's moving so quickly, you really have to slow it down to pick this one out. Another detail I've spotted is the stripped back ambient occlusion on Switch. Again, it's a subtle one given so much of the game plays out at night, but check out this locker. The blobs of shade don't look too elegant on PS4 in the first place, but clearly Switch is dialing it down overall, and the same applies to shadow resolution in general. There's a scene early on just after the helicopter crash where you get a good look at character silhouettes, large shadows that spread across the scenery. Here again you can see a massive reduction in that texture resolution and also geometry complexity for rocks, but on top of that the shadow preset takes a hit on Switch. Last but not least is a difference in volumetric fog quality. This one doesn't take much of a zoom in to notice. Switch still has a partial use of the effect in the distant woods, but under the windmill in the foreground the air is pretty much clear on Switch. PS4 clearly has a more profound use of the effect. All of this combines to a point where you can say definitively Switch is running at worse settings overall, but does that actually matter? Personally, I'd argue no. The fact is, Outlast 2 deliberately obscures a lot of its visuals, which made a lot of these comparisons difficult to pick out in the first place. For a start, a bulk of the opening act runs in the dead of night, meaning you see the world through the lens of a camcorder. It's a found footage style of course, with lots of film grain, chromatic aberration and a night vision filter, all of which really helps hide a host of evils. In this case, the shadows, ambient occlusion and even texture differences are masked over. The only part I've really missed from the PS4 version, with the knowledge I have now, is that fog effect. Now much of this should have been evident in just the download size on Switch. Coming in at 9.6GB, you're looking at around half of the 21GB install on PS4 or Xbox One, not factoring in patches. Assets are swapped and there's been a lot of chopping and changing to get this game running on Nintendo's handheld, though it is effective, especially considering it looks just as good in the portable mode too, where that smaller screen will hide all of these cutbacks even further. The main difference? Well, it's arguably that move to 30 FPS, rather than the full 60 you get on other consoles. It's a concession you can take in your stride and you get used to it. That target of 30 is also well met from the hour or so I've had time to test. Running through some of the more potentially taxing scenes early on, you can expect one frame hiccups and stutters here and there, and the odd frame pacing blip to 16 milliseconds on that graph to the left. But these are really quite rare. From everything I've seen so far, there's enough headroom to lock this game at 30 on Switch, and that also goes for playing in the portable mode too. A promising turnout then, and based on this quick look, one of the better ports to arrive on the system. Between this, Doom and Rocket League, it's surprising how many current gen games are making the leap to Switch. Outlast 2 also shows Nintendo's handheld, again punching above its weight when it comes to getting the most from a hardware spec that was never intended to be on par with a PS4. Anyway, that's all from me for now. If you found this one useful at all, please let me know with a like or subscribe. And as ever, the source file to this video is already uploaded to our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. But until next time, thanks for watching.
You mockery of his will!